Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if real-life Moon Knight comes to DxD world? Part 1. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Issei Haidu was walking with his girlfriend Yuma Amano in the park at nighttime after their date holding hands. Yuma walks forwards to the water fountain in the park and she turns around to Issei with her hands behind her back, skip towards Issei with a shy smile on her face. Yuma said sweetly, "In honor of our first date there is something I want you to do." As she got closer to Issei, making him blush. Issei thought, I'm going to get to kiss her, this rocks. As he looks at his girlfriend that bowing towards him waiting for his response to her request. Isaiah said, "Sure, go ahead." As Yuma leans forwards, giving Issei a clear view of her face that has a sinister smile which spooked Issei. Yuma said in a mature seductive voice, "Will you die for me?" Causing Issei to look taken back by her request, but he wanted to see if she can repeat it again. Issei chuckled, "What you say?" "Sorry, something must be wrong with my ears, I don't think I heard you correctly." As he went to clean out his left ear with a single finger and Yuma came closer to his ear with the same smile. Yuma whispered, "Will you die for me?" Yuma begins to grow taller, taking on a more mature appearance, and her eyes changed, taking on a darker, more evil look. Her clothing also changed dramatically, now consisting of black, strap-like objects, resembling leather, around and under her breasts, a thong-like piece held around her hips by 3 thin straps, gloves that ran right up her arms with small lengths of chains hanging from them, shoulder guard-like objects on her shoulders with 3 large spikes sprouting from her right shoulder, and black thigh heel boots. Issei thought, isn't this what people call an exhibition? This isn't the time for that. Wings as he falls on his ass looking at his date who just transformed into an angel dominatrix of some kind. Yuma said, "Haughty, although short-lived, playing innocent lovey-dovey with you was fun. I'll take good care of gift from you." As she looks at the pink bracelet on her wrist while Issei looks in fear. Yuma said, "So." As her hand stretches out, a light spear begins to form, causing Issei to pale in fear at the sight of the spear. Issei pleaded, "Yuma." Making Yuma smile a predatory smile at him. Yuma finished, "Please die." She launches the light spear towards Issei, making him closes his eyes, but before the light spear could hit him, something intercepted it, along with making a metal clang sound, causing them to snap their attention to see stuck in the ground was sliver darting in the shape of a crescent moon. This Yuma to look at the weapon in horror, while Issei looked at the weapon in confused, but before any words could be said a figure lands on the top of the fountain in a crouch position, making Yuma slowly turn to her horror, and Issei's curiosity was an athletic figure dressed in a black bodysuit that is lightweight plated armor with a crescent moon in the center with a white hood and cape, but what caught Issei's attention was the black mask with 2 narrowed blue slits, eyes staring at Yuma. Yuma whispered in fear, "No, not you." As the figure stands up, now casting a shadow over Yuma, causing her to shudder in fear. The figure announced, "Now you face Khonshu's champion." The figure jumps in the air and throws several crescent darts at Yuma which clipped her wings, causing her to scream in pain, while Issei winces. Issei thought, "I know she tried to kill me, but damn." Little did they know they were being watched. Bitnjim Kaneko, who was ordered by the president of the Occult Research Club to monitor Issei on his date with Yuma Amano, who was revealed to be a fallen angel, but she got horrified when she saw the white hooded figure show up to save him. Kaneko thought the president will not like this. The white hooded cape charges at Yuma, who is holding her wings in pain, but she didn't have time to prepare as the white figure deliver a jab to the face of Yuma, along with followed by an over-the-shoulder arm drag, which put Yuma on her back. The white figure said, "Submit." As he pulls out a crescent moon dart to press against the neck of Yuma, who is looking at the white figure in fear and hatred, while Issei looked at him in awe along with Kaneko. Yuma pleaded, "I submit, please let me go." But the white figure narrowed his eyes, and he pressed the dart even deeper into the neck of Yuma, causing blood to ooze out of her neck, making her scream out in pain. Ria's Gremory shows behind Kaneko, causing the normally stoic Masket to jump back in surprise to see the president of the club. But the president's jaw nearly dropped to see the fallen angel being held down by a normal people dressed in wired clothing. Ria's thought it's him, but I thought he handled normal criminals and strays. Riaz and Konkyo continued to watch as the whited figure held down Yuma, who is pleading with the figure to let her go, but the figure didn't budge as pressed the dart even deeper in the neck of the fallen angel, drawing even more blood. Issei said, "Hey stranger, I think you made your point." Which caused the figure to turn towards Issei, along with standing up with a dart that has Yuma blood on it. The figure said, "She must pay for her crimes." Yuma took this distraction to take out the darts that are in her wings and take flight, causing the figure to curse silently, making him glare at Issei. Kaneko asked, "President, should we confront them?" Ria shook her head signaling not to confront them, making Kaneko agree, but inward sigh because she detests the pervert and fears the white figure. Riaz conjures a portal, and the girls walk through it, causing the portal to create a flash that grabbed Issei's attention, making him wonder what was that flash of light, but he shrugged it off, causing to turn to see that the white figure is gone. Issei said, "Great, I'm talking to myself." Issei walks away with his hands in his pocket, grumbling about the worst date ever. Meanwhile, in the apartment room, the white costumed figure was sitting on a couch with one leg over the other leg, leaning back against the couch with a mask on their face, until he used his left arm to take off the mask, revealing a young man with brown hair and silver eyes, with a slightly tan complexion. The young man said, "She got away, damn it, but at least I saved Issei from becoming a devil." The youth get off the couch, and he stands in the living room of the apartment in deep thought of how came to this world. The youth didn't come from the world where creatures of the supernatural are common, but in a world that's similar to the real world, but he was a vigilante called the Moon Knight, similar to his Marvel counterpart, but with a slight difference. Flashback, the youth was patrolling the streets of Chicago in his costume, looking down from the top of a building, inspecting for any signs of criminal activity, but he doesn't, which makes him relax for a little bit as he watches the civilians do their daily routines. His name was Brian Johnson of Chicago, Illinois, to two young couples, but on a fateful day, when he 15, his parents were murdered by a mobster who came across them when he was running from the police. Brian's parents were shot to death and he was too, but before he could die, Khonshu came to him to give him a chance of living again, but to become the Avatar of Vengeance Moon Knight, his favorite comic book character, but with a price as he develops a split personality called Moon Knight. But back to the story, Brian Johnson was pondering about his life and how he ended up becoming Moon Knight of the real world. He remembers almost dying on that fateful, but before he crosses over, Khonshu and Spurt came to him with an offer to live again, but with becoming his Avatar of Vengeance or Moon Knight, if you are a Marvel fan. Brian found out that Stan Lee based Moon Knight on a legendary Aptane warrior named Atem who was a champion of Nashu, but being the champion has its flaws, as he developed a separated personality like Mark Spector. Brian did too, and the personality name is called Moon Knight, who is cold and vengeful, who is currently in control. Moon Knight thought no crime strange. Moon Knight turns to see a blue glowing orb floating towards him, making him get into his stance, as the orb approaches him without doing anything threatening, making him slightly drop his guard. The orb announced in a booming voice. Brian Johnson of Earth 83, your presence is needed to decide the fate of the multiverse. Before Moon Knight can give out his argument, the orb fires a blue ray that transported him to another plane of existence. Flashback over. Brian sigh as he remembers being brown to the high school DxD world by the orb, which he later found out that was the one above all from Marvel comic. The one above all told him something coming in the multiverse, and him along with a few other are the only ones that can stop the threat. One above all also told that his presence is needed here in the DxD world, making Moon Knight think of threats like Acabiel, Lucifer, Nemesis, etc. Brian thought no matter who the threat, they will suffer the wrath of the Moon Knight. As he clenches his hands, making them crack. Kuo Academy Occult Club Room. Riaz and her peerage were all at their seat ready to discuss the topics of Issei's survival, a fallen angel on their territory, but more importantly the appearance of the one that called Moon Knight. The club has heard about Moon Knight as he handles regular criminal, but he also handles stray devils and other supernatural creatures, making the three factions wary of him. The Kendo giggled, ara, he has been brutal as ever. Making her fellow club members sweat drop because out of everyone in the club, she admires his brutal methods in dealing with criminals and strays. Diba said, Akeno, you may like him, but the rest of us fear him. Making the club excluding Akeno nod in agreement to Kiba's statement because Moon Knight is very ruthless in dealing with criminal or strays. Proof was when he killed a stray devil without a second thought, making them shivering minus Akeno who gained a roused look. Riaz said, I was hoping to avoid crossing him, but he is very unpredictable and dangerous for a human. Which made Riaz wonder if he is even human considering his accolades, making him a candidate right next to Issei to get her out of her marriage with Razor. Kaneko said, President, I don't think he is human because no human shouldn't have that type of speed or strength. Making Riaz nod along with Kiba, while Akeno kept giggling thinking about Moon Knight's brutal methods. Riaz said, I agree, but let's worry about him later because we need to figure what Issei's sacred gear is. Making the rest of the club nodded their heads in agreement because the mystery surrounding Issei's sacred gear is the main priority, but they will keep an open mind on Moon Knight. Riaz thought I will get my freedom back. Issei was walking through the hallway of Kuo Academy with a scowl on his faces as he was covered in bruises after he was used by his friends Mitsuda and Motohama, who watched the Kendo girls change, but they used Issei as a scapegoat, causing to take the fall as they escape. Issei thought traitors. As he walks through the hallway, he sees a familiar figure leaning against a locker with a bored look on his face, causing Issei to look dumbfounded as he recognizes the figure leaning against the locker. The figure leaning against the locker was an American boy with brown eyes, sliver eyes, dressed in the standard Kuo Academy male uniform that barely hides his athletic frame. Was Brian Johnson, or Mr. Knight, as the ladies call him for his gentleman's actions. Brian greeted, hey Issei, and damn you look fucked up. As he looks at Issei mocking Issei sigh in sadness making Brian look at him in confusion, but he sees Issei's bruises, making the young man wince. Brian asked, your friends bailed on you? Making Issei flinch giving Brian the answer he needs causing Brian to scowl making Issei look dumbfounded as to why the most beloved male a figure second after Kiba would be concerned for a pervert like him. Brian said, look Issei it isn't my business to tell you who can be your friends, but you need to drop those sacks of shits. As he gives Issei a look of seriousness causing Issei to think, and he remembers the times of being his friend's scapegoat for the times they were peaking on the kendo team. Issei thought, maybe Johnson has a point. As remembered that his friends take things to the extreme, and he remembers the times of having to stop them before things can escalate, but he would usually take the fall. Issei thought sure I love female anatomy, but I love a girl with a good personality too. As he thought about his situation until he decided to make his final judgment as he sticks his hand out for a handshake for Brian. Issei said, my name is Issei Haidu, and it is a great honor to be your friend. As he smiles as watches Brian grasps his hand completing the handshake, along with giving him a friendly smile as well. Brian said, my name is Brian Johnson and I will gladly accept your friendship. As the two newly made friends grin at each other which gained a lot of female attention, but it was negative attention as they began to cry. How dare that pervert touches our knight. He trying to corrupt our knight. Run Mr. Knight. Maybe the pervert can learn a thing or two from Mr. Knight. Brian said, aw shit here we go again. Time to get out of here. As he and Issei bolted from the stampede of girls, but the duo didn't see was Konkyo who was snacking on a piece of chocolate was waking the whole scene. Konkyo thought there is something off about Brian and he smells like Moon Knight, but that should be impossible. After school, Issei is walking through the city with his backpack on his back and he has a smile on his face since he made a new friend in Brian Johnson. He is walking down the city sidewalk careless as people went out their day until he heard a lady scream. Help help help. Issei snaps out of his daze and he hears several sounds of people shouting coming from the alley, making him run to the source of the noise. He several gang members surrounding Caddis who is being held from behind by two gang members making Issei eyes widened. The leader said, come on girlie we just want to have a good time. As he sticks his tongue out and his lips grossing Caddis as she tries to fight out of the hold, but the two gang members won't budge. Issei thought I have to do something. Issei sees trash with the lid still on the top, making him come up with a good plan. The gang leader reaches under Caddis' skirt, but he was hit by a trash can which knocks him to ground holding, making the two gang members let go of Caddis, who was about to run, until she saw Issei holding the trash can lid like a shield, as he is surrounded by the gang members. Caddis said, what are you doing pervert? Run away. As she watches the pervert that she would beat up for peeking on her fellow kendoist along, but right now she is afraid for Issei as the gang members surrounded him. Issei yelled, don't WORRT about me and just go. As he hits one of the members with a lid and he is soon overswarmed by the members as they all jumped him. Caddis's eyes widened and she runs from the alley to look for a phone booth since her phone is dead. As she was running she begins to think about the Issei and her past action, causing her to feel sick as she would take pleasure in beating him. Caddis thought I'm sorry Issei. As she continued to run, but she didn't notice on the roof of a building was Moon Knight who narrowed his blue lens's eyes at her as she runs away with a guilty look on her face. Moon Knight said, something must have happened. As he drops down in front of her, causing Cats to fall on her butt looking up at him with surprise and fear as she looks at him. Caddis hears about him on the news about his brutal method of dealing with criminals. Moon Knight demanded, talk. As he looks down at Caddis who gets up from the ground to look him in the eyes and she points back towards the alley where Issei is located along with flinching as she hears Issei screams in pain. Caddis said, a classmate of mine's is getting jumped by some gang members who held me against my will, but Issei came to my rescue. She let out a few tears making Moon Knight gain a softened gaze, but he remembers he has to save someone. Moon Knight said, find the nearest police station and get help. Moon Knight reaches into his belt to pull out a white grappling gun with a hook connected to it. He aims it at the roof, but before he could pull the trigger, he was stopped by Cats. Cat said, please save and make them. As she grabs his arm and squeezes it tightly, making Moon Knight look, but he gently removes her arms to look at the roof. Moon Knight said, I will. As he pulls the trigger, releasing the hook and going up to the roof with Caddis watching in awe, but she remembers she has to go to the police station for help, but she has a feeling Moon Knight is going to clean house. Moon Knight lands on the roof and he leaps over to another building, then he hears the sounds of Issei grunting in pain, followed by the sound of laughter, causing Moon Knight's eyes to narrow again as he leaps over to another building. Moon Knight lands and he looks down to a sight that made him grit his teeth in anger as he sees Issei bleeding from a cut on the side of his head, laying on the ground with the gang members standing over, but they let their leader walk in front of them. The leader said, you got lucky, punk, and it's time to show you why never mess with us. As he reaches behind his back to pull out a gun making Moon Knight scowl behind his mask, along with grabbing a crescent dagger. As the leader pulled the trigger, Moon Knight throws the dagger at the leader's hand, causing the gun to drop out of the leader's hands, with the dart stuck in the leader, making the leader scream in pain. Moon Knight jumps in the middle with his cape covering his body, and he sees the gang members, along with the leader's eyes widened in fear as they see the violent vigilante who've been making his presence known over the news by his brutal method in dealing with criminals. Moon Knight said, "Defiers of the innocent face the wrath of the Moon Knight." As he pulls out 2 crescent darts and he jumps at the nearby gang member to stab him in the eyes with the dart made the member fall the ground with the darts in his eyes. The leader said, "Get him." As the gang snapped out of their horrified gaze to charge at Moon Knight. Moon Knight takes down some of the gang's members, then he fights some of the remaining thugs until he beats them out, leaving him with the terrified leader of the gang. Moon Knight walks towards him slowly and the leader tries to run, but he falls face forward to the ground and Moon Knight throws a dart at his back. Moon Knight said, "You will not escape." As he walks over the leader and he begins to stomp on him, making the scream out in pain. Moon Knight hears the police siren and he remembers Issei, so he turns his attention back to Issei. Moon Knight said, "Time to get you out of here, my friend." As he walks over to Issei and he lifts him over his shoulder, then fires his grappling to launch up to the roof, leaving the unconscious gang on the ground. With Issei's eyes begin to move until they were completely open as he notices that he is in an apartment along with laying on a couch, but he felt something wrapped around the side of his head, making him feel as he felt a bandage is wrapped around, making him confused until he remembers what happened. Issei thought, "I got jumped, but I hope Caddis got away safely." As he leans back on the couch, but he jumps as he hears the sound of a door creaking. He sees Brian, but to his surprise was wearing the Moon Knight costume. Issei asked, "Be Brian your Moon Knight?" As he points a finger at him, causing Brian to sigh as he was caught by his new friend. Brian gives Issei a nod, making Issei look shocked at his friend's secret but transforming into awe. Issei said, "Wow, you're like a normal guy like me." As he looks at his newly made friend in awe, causing Brian to raise an eyebrow, but he shrugged at Issei and Brian went to grab a chair to sit. Brian said, "If you have any questions then let me hear him." As he sits down in his seat as he gives Issei his attention. Issei asked, "How did you become Moon Knight?" Making Brian flinch, which didn't go unnoticed by Issei, which made Issei feel a bit bad. Issei said, "You don't have to me if you don't, Brian." Making Brian wave him off as he lets out a chuckle. Brian said, "Well, it's a long story, Issei, so get comfortable." Making Issei leans back on the couch as he looks at Issei. Issei said, "Take your time." 5 minutes later, Issei couldn't believe that his friend Brian Johnson was the violent vigilante Moon Knight, but he hears how he became the hero after he and his family were gunned down by a thug, but before Brian could die, he was saved by the god of vengeance named Nosu, who made him his avatar. Issei wanted to believe it impossible, but then again, he saw his date Uma transform into a sick twisted version of an angel. Brian said, "There is my origin." Still, think it's cool, Issei, as he looks at Issei for a response, but he sees Issei's look of sympathy. Issei said, "I'm sorry for the loss of your folks." Making Brian pat Issei on the shoulder, causing Issei to feel a little bit at ease. Brian said, "Well, it's getting late and time for you to head home." As he gets up from his seat, but he sees looking at him with a determined expression, then he jumps from the couch on his knees, surprising Brian. Issei said, "Please teach me to be like you." As he begs on his knee, which startled Brian as he looks down at his newly made friend and he began to think. Brian asked, "Why do you want me to teach, and what do you mean to teach you?" as he looks down at Issei, who is now looking up at him. Issei said, "I'm sick of being weak and I want to fight for those who can't fight for themselves." Making Brian raise an eyebrow in interest as he looks down at Issei, who now staring at him with a serious look. Brian thought, "Reminds me of my friends from my world." Brian said, "I accept, but you must pass my training." Issei said, "Whatever it takes." As he looks up at Brian, who has the biggest grin on his face, which scared Issei a bit. Brian said, "Good, we start soon." After a full week of training, Issei was able to become a partner for Brian in fighting crime under the name Red Draco. Issei learned self-defense, parkour, stealth, weapon training and interrogation from Brian, who was willing to teach him the skills which Issei was gladly willing to take. Issei gains a more athletic build, and he also had an attitude adjustment, but he maintains his love of the female anatomy with slight control. Issei also figures out from Brian why his date tried to kill him, and it was during meditation exercise. Flashback, Issei was sitting in a lotus position with his eyes closed until a red gauntlet with a green jewel and 2 golden spikes, which caused Brian to look shocked at the gauntlet appearance, along with Issei, who now had his eyes opened as he looks at the gauntlet in wonder. Brian thought the sacred gear has entered the game. As he looks the gear in wonders. Issei asked, "What is this?" As he touches the gauntlet with his right finger. Flashback over, Brian told him it was a sacred gear and its history with the 3 factions, causing Issei to look at his sacred gear in awe, but he was disappointed that Brian couldn't help him with using its power. Issei meets the dragon that resides in the gauntlet on accident as he went to sleep. From what Issei told Brian, the meeting was interesting because the dragon half expected a full-blown pervert but got a well-balanced Issei who wanted to become a hero like his new best friend Brian, which made the dragon respect him a bit, but he wants to see if Issei can back it up. Brian and Issei were walking the hallway heading home with their backpacks on their back, but they heard the sounds of the female student swoon, causing the two friends to see what the commotion was, but they see Kibayudo, the charming prince of the school, was heading in their direction with his usual smile on his face. Kiba said, "Brian Johnson and Issei Haidu, please come with me." As he gestures to the occult room down the hall, which made the girls confused as they voiced their opinions. "What is our prince doing with the pervert and our knight? I can our knight, but the pervert needs to watch his back if he does anything to piss us off. Come on girls, he stops hanging with the other perverts, so cut him some slack." That comment came from Caddis after seeing him risk his life for her. See, she kinda ease up on him a bit since he stops peeking on the kendo, along with dropping the other perverts to their satisfaction, but some of the girls refuse to accept him. The two friends follow Kiba to the occult room and they see Kiba open the door leading them instead of the room to see the scenery, which made the two look at the room in awe of the design. They see Kankyo eating snacks and they see Akeno giggling at them, causing both of them to blush. The kendo said, "Ara, my cute little underclassmen are here." As she giggles at Issei and Brian blushing, but she hears footsteps coming behind her, causing her to snap her attention from the two students to the person coming behind her. The person standing behind her was Riaz Gremory, the president of the club. Riaz said, "Welcome to the occult club." As she looks at the two friends with a friendly smile on her face, but the two friends looked at her with a neutral gaze on their face which thrown her off a bit, but she still held her smile. Brian said, "Thank you for the wonderful tour and let's get down to business." Causing Ria's smile to drop as a mask of serious to take over her face as she looks at the two male students that are part of her plan. Riaz asked, "Do you believes devils?" She and her fellow club members look at the two male friends waiting for their answers. Brian said, "Oh yeah, well, we know you're devils and no, we won't join you." He looks at the club members who have a shocked expression on their faces. Issei snickered at their looks while Brian just looks annoyed as he wanted to just leave school with Issei to patrol the city and look for any trouble, either mundane or supernatural, probably the latter since both of the friends want to find out about Yuma who got away. Riaz asked, "How do you know?" As she looks Brian, who just scowls at her, and Issei who is still snickering at her, making her more confused, which was mirrored by her fellow devils as they wait for an explanation. Brian said, "Well, for one there shouldn't be an occult club here and I hear talking about something called a sacred gear. As he smirks at the paling faces of the devils while Issei full-blown laugh at them. Riaz said, "We got some dirt on you too, as well Brian. Or should we call you Moon Knight and Red Draco? As she smirks at the duo who narrowed their eyes at her as she sits down on the couch. Riaz smirked, "Could you imagine what everyone in the student body would say to vigilantes as students? But if you join my peerage then I will not tell a single soul your secrets and you will get the benefit of being a devil along with starting your peerage." Brian said, "Tell them, then." As he and Issei made their way to the door leaving the stunned devils behind. Tiba said, "That didn't go well, President." Making the rest of the club members nod their heads in approval. The two friends are walking down the hallway with scowls on their faces to the exit of the school and all pause waiting for their anger to cool down as they stand there. The two friends have a night of patrolling to do. Issei said, "We are going on patrol, right?" As he looks at Brian, who nodded at him, causing Issei to grin widely. A few hours later, it was nighttime. The occult club members were currently confronting a stray devil named Visor, who is a young woman with a voluptuous figure with short white hair, but her lower body was gigantic and beastly with 4 legs, each having sharp claws, and a snake as a tail. Her overall appearance was reminiscent of that of a centaur. Ria said, "Surrender, Visor." As she points dramatically at the stray devil, causing the stray devil to laugh mockingly. Before the stray devil could say anything, 2 figures landed in front of the devils, causing them to look at the 2 figures before them. The familiar figure is Moon Knight, but the second caught everyone's attention as the figure was dressed in a suit that looked similar to the Arkham Knight, but red and black with a design of a dragon instead of a bat, was standing next to Moon Knight. Visor hissed, "Moon Knight, and I see you brought a friend." As she looks at the new figure that's standing by the feared vigilante in interest along with the occult club. Red Draco said in a mechanized voice, "Name Red Draco, and we are here to take you down." As he and Moon Knight get in their stances, making the stray laugh. Visor said, "I'm so scared." Moon Knight pulls a sword from his cape, which caught Kiba's attention as he grits his teeth at the sword in disgust. The sword looks like Saber from Fate Zero, but it was white and blue with a Moon Knight symbol on the guard. Kiba thought that can't be. As he looks at the sword in anger as he recalls the horrible memories of seeing a sword like that before in his childhood. Moon Knight and Red Draco went to go on the offensive, while the peerage watches them with interest as they fight the rogue devil. Red Draco is using 2 guns to shoot bullets at Visor, who trying to block, but she was slashed from behind by Moon Knight. Visor screeches in pain, and she was shot in the left breast by Red Draco, making Rias along her female peerage members wince in pain. Red Draco shots her again in the stomach, causing Visor to scream again, along with fall on both of her knees holding her stomach. Moon Knight said, "Face our wrath." As he charges at her and slashes her neck, causing her head to fall forward along with her body turning into ashes with her head. Moon Knight said, "It has been done." As he sheathed his sword and he was able to walk with Red Draco, but he to block Kiba's blade as it came near his face. Kiba demanded, "Where did you get that sword?" As he locks blade with Moon Knight who just narrowed his lenses at him, but he begins to think back on how he found the sword. Flashbacks. Issei and Brian, who is in their costume, are investigating a disturbance in a cave that was told by them from Drake, who sensed it when they were training in the forest. Moon Knight sees the sword stuck in the ground, making him curious. The figure approaches me, causing both Red Draco and Moon Knight to look around for the source of the voice, but the sword glow green, causing the duo to look at the sword in confusion. But Red Draco was having a conversation to Drake, who is telling them that the sword is one of the swords of Excalibur. "I am one of the swords of Excalibur, and I have chosen you to be my wielder." Moon Knight walks forward and he grabs the blade from the handle, causing him to be engulfed in green energy, making him closes his eyes. Moon Knight opens his eyes to see that he isn't in the cave anymore. Moon Knight sees that he is in a throne room of some kind, and he see a being made out of green energy floating towards him, making Moon Knight get in his fighting stance, but he drops his stance a bit as the being just floating at him in a non-threatening manner. The being said, "Welcome Brian Johnson," causing Moon Knight to narrow his eyes at the being before him. Moon Knight asked, "How do you know my name?" as he draws a dagger from his cape to use if necessary. The being said, "I am not your enemy Brian Johnson." Moon Knight put away his dart and he gives the being his undivided attention as he looks at the being with suspicion, causing the being to come closer to him as Moon Knight sees that he is not a threat. The being said, "Hello mighty warrior, I am the spirit of Excalibur. After my body was destroyed, many of used my pieces for their own greed, so I entered blessing, so that I can wait for a warrior worthy of wielding me. The church's views of naturals and barbaric experiments only use a small portion of my power. There is not natural only worthy, which is why I have chosen you to be my wielder. Collect my other half and complete me, so that you may become the strongest, so you can protect the other worlds from a dark force." Moon Knight said, "Tell me what you need me to do." Flashback over. Moon Knight said, "Walk away now." As he pushes Kiba back with his sword and he glares at the Knight of the Peerage. Kiba just scowls at him and he sheaths his weapon away to walk back over to his king's side to look at the two vigilantes. Rias walks forward to them, causing the duo to tense up as they see Rias Gremory give them her usual smile. Rias said, "Good Brian and Issei Red Draco. My offer stands you too." Making the two look at each other until they look back at her. Moon Knight Red Draco said, "Fuck no." Moon Knight throws a smoke bomb to the ground, causing the smoke to be let out which blinded the devils. The smoke cleared up, but the duo vanished, causing Rias to scowl in anger as she wanted to add them to her peerage. Rias said, "Damn it, they got away." Bekendo asked, Ara, they are bold, aren't they president?" as she giggles softly with a hand cover her mouth which made Rias even more frustrated. Rias thought, "I need a way to get those two on my side." As she narrows her eyes, trying to think of a way of getting the duo in her peerage. Kiba thought, "I will destroy Excalibur, and I will have my revenge." He grits his teeth and he clenches his fist in anger. Brian and Issei are walking from school and they are eager to begin patrolling the city, but they are wary of crossing the devils again since they've been pestering them about joining their peerage, but the duo could hardly care about the peerage or their problems. Brian said, "Man, they are pushing it." Issei. He looks over at his friend Issei, who also nodded in agreement. Issei said, "Yeah man, but I had to deal with my former friends." As he sighs in frustration along with pinching his nose. Flashback. Issei was heading to his class, but he was dragged by Mitsuda and Motohama to the boy restroom. Issei is pushed against the wall with his two former friends, giving him an accusing glare on their faces, making Issei raise an eyebrow at them. Issei asked, "Can I help you too?" As he looks at them with his arms crossed as he is leaning against the wall of the restroom. Mitsuda said, "Yeah you can, you traitor." As he glares at Issei in betrayal along with pointing an accusing finger at Issei. Motohama asked, "Why the hell are you hanging out with the pretty boy and not your true friends?" Issei as he crosses his arms over his chest as he too glares at Issei. The trio hears the restroom door opening and they see Brian cracking his knuckle loudly, which made Issei's ex-friends flinch as they see Brian glaring at them, which made Issei smile as he see his true friend come to the rescue. Brian said, "Time to whack a pervert." As he cracks his knuckles for a final time as the two perverts begin to beg for mercy. Flashback over. Issei said, "Thanks for having my back Brian." As he looks over Brian with an honest smile on his face. Brian said, "Anytime Issei." As he returns the smile at Issei. The duo is currently walking through the park and they see a girl with blonde hair that flows all the way down to her back, with split bangs over her forehead and a single strand sticking out from the top and sloping backward, dressed in beside a bench. Brian thought there she is Asia and I will make sure you won't die. As he solemnly swore as he looks at Asia. Brian asked, you need any help miss as he offers a hand to Isa who gladly takes it as she stands up but the wind blew her white veil, revealing her bright green eyes. Issei and Brian stare into those bright green orbs for different, but Brian's has a blush on his face, which didn't go unnoticed by Issei who gained a knowing smirk on his face, but he see Asia blushing as well as she looks into his sliver eyes in wonder. Asia said, thank you and you are so kind mister. Brian said, Brian Johnson and happy to help a nun. As he offers a handshake that Asia gladly accepts. Asia said, my Asia Argento, and it a pleasure to meet you Brian. Her stomach grumbled loudly, causing her blush and embarrassment. The duo chuckled at her which caused her blush again which only added to her embarrassment, but the duo stopped the chuckling and grinned at her. The winds blow again this causes the veil to get caught in the wind only for Brian to grab it just in time. Brian said, here you go ma'am. As he hands the veils back to Asia. Asia said, thank you. As she accepts the veil back from Brian. Asia said, I'm sorry I am kinda lost. As she looks the dup with a sheepish expression on her face. Brian said, but first let get you something to munch on. The trio went to a nearby restaurant in a booth eating burgers. Asia hunger is be satisfied, which made Brian and Issei happy as they watched their new friend munch on her burger with a look of satisfaction. Brian asked, hit the spot, didn't it Asia as he finishes his burger along with Issei. Issei asked, hey Asia what you go to the park making Issei break eye contact with the duo, causing Brian to narrow his eyes at Issei. Asia said, the weather was perfect and I thought it would be nice to get and enjoy the day. As she smiles at the duo. Asia said, but then I saw you two my fun day got even better so yeah. As she looks down her burger. Brian said, so since you're free let's all of us hang out together. Asia and Issei looked at Brian with a dumbfounded expression, but Asia blushed then it transforms into an excited smile. The trio went to the arcade to plays like Dance Dance Revolution, the racing game, Taking Group, and Brian won a stuffed animal that looks like Pikachu. Currently, the trio is walking out of the arcade with Asia holding her plushie to her chest. Little did Brian or Issei, she was glancing at Brian with a deep red blush that could rival a tomato as she holds the plushie close to her chest. Asia thought Brian and Issei are very polite, but every time I am around Brian my stomach flutters. As she holds her plushie tightly to her chest as well as looking at Brian. The trio is walking near the fountain and Asia takes a seat on the bench with the two males standing in front of her looking at the fountain admiring its beauty with the sun still shining brightly. Brian remembers today is when the fallen angel known as Rainer will return for Asia. Asia said, thank you, guys. As she looks at Brian and Issei in applications. Brian said, anytime Asia and besides we are all friends. As he gives her a smile which made her smile, but she looks down in sadness to Issei's confusion and Brian's understanding since he knows why she is sad. Issei asked, what wrong Asia? Asia said, it just that when I was younger no one wanted to be my friend. As she looks down in sadness. Brian said, those people are idiots for not wanting to be your friend and we will be your friend. As he smiles at Issei. Issei said, yeah and you can count on us, Asia. As he also smiles to Asia as well as showing support to her. Before Asia could voice her gratefulness the trio all hear familiar laughter coming behind them, causing them to see Uma looking at them with a mocking look, causing the trio to feel different emotions as they see her on the fountain looking at them with that arrogant smirk on her face. Uma said, oh isn't that cute little Asia made some friends. As she leers at the trio mockingly. Asia said, Lady Rainer. As she looks at the fallen angel in fear. Issei said, right fallen angel. Rainer said, so the rumors about your downward spiral into the wickedness of the devils were true and I have such high hope. Don't even try to run Asia. As she narrowed her eyes at Asia. Asia said, Began I want no part of the evil you and the other angels are up to. I ran away I'm sorry but I couldn't stand being around them anymore. As she turns to the duo with an apologetic look. Issei said, don't apologize and we are glad you did. You are too good for them. You don't belong with them bunch of good for nothing wanted bastards. As he glares at his former date in anger as he remembers his almost near death experience by her hands. Issei demanded, what do you want from me Uma? As he and Brian stand in front of Asia protectively. Rainer said, oh don't worry my business has nothing to do with you little boy. Though I guess we can finish what we started couldn't we? As she smirks at Issei but when she sees Brian her smirk turns flirty. Rainer said, well aren't you a handsome one? And dare I say you look divine. As she looks at Brian with a flirty look on her face. Brian said, you're not my type. As he pulls a crescent dart from his jacket and throws at Rainer who had a shocked. The dart nicked the side of her face, creating a scar on the side of it, making Asia gasp in shock, along with covering her mouth. Issei, however, smirked in the pleasure of seeing his ex being nicked. Rainer said, my beautiful face. You will pay for thaw as he was interrupted by Issei who shot her in the head with his handgun when he was given the signal by Brian which was the dart. Her body hits the fountain and turns to dust, leaving the duo with a horrified nun who is looking at Issei in horror, but she faints in shock. Brian and Issei looked at each other sheepishly, but they grew serious as they need to get Asia to safety and away from the other fallen angels. Brian said, "Let's get her out of here." As he picks up Asia and puts her in a bridal style. As they were leaving, they didn't notice the Konkyo was watching them with a shocked expression because of two things: a nun in devil's territory and Brian killed a fallen angel in devil territory, which spells trouble for the devils. Hankeko said, "I must tell the president." As she rushes back to the school to tell the president. Brian's apartment. Asia opens her eyes to see that she is in an apartment on a couch and she sees a familiar vigilante duo standing in front, making her jump up in fright, but before she could let a scream, Moon Knight covers her mouth along taking off his mask, revealing him to be Brian. Asia asked Brian. She looks over at Red Draco, who is reaching for his helmet. Red Draco removes his mask, revealing himself to be Issei, to Asia's astonishment as she gasps loudly. The duo looks a bit guilty that they didn't tell their newly made friend about their double life, but before they say anything the door was being banged on, which made the trio confused as Issei and Asia look at Brian for answers. Issei asked, "Were you expecting somebody, Brian?" Brian said, "No, I wasn't." Brian walks to the door and he signals Issei to pull out a handgun ready if it was a fallen angel. Brian opens the door to see to his annoyance Riaz and her peerage, but he sees Riaz looking at with angry expression, causing Brian to raise an eyebrow in confusion, but he was pushed to the side by Riaz as she along with her peerage entered the house without an invite, causing Issei silently swore in anger. Issei said, "Great Red Riding bitch is here." As leans against the wall looking at all the members of the peerage in contempt. Riaz said, "You went too far, Johnson, and you Issei, I expected better of you." As she points the accusing at both of the vigilantes in disappointment. Issei asked, "What the fuck you talking, Gremory?" As he leans against her with his arm crossed over his chest looking at her with a scowl on his face. Riaz said, "You killing the fallen angel and you taking that nun into your house has jeopardized the whole devil community." As she looks at both of the vigilantes in anger and the nun in disgust. Asia flinches in fear, causing Brian and Issei to scowl at her in anger at the way they insulted their new friend. They hear quiet sobbing coming behind, making both of them turn round to see Asia crying, causing Issei and especially Brian to scowl at Riaz, who has a smug look. Riaz said, "Get the nun out of here and out of territory immediate." How? Riaz was sent to the floor holding her face from the punch from Brian, who has the biggest scowl on his face, with causing everyone to look taken back by the ferocious look on the normally mild-mannered male student that is second behind Kiba. Brian glares at Riaz and her peerage, causing them to shake in fear. Brian asked, "Who the fuck are you coming in my house demanding shit, and you red-haired spoiled bitch, who are you, tell us what to do?" As he roars in anger, causing Riaz to flinch back along with everyone else. Brian was about to say more, but Akeno and Kiba got in front of him looking very angry that he insulted their leader, but Brian didn't care as he got some dirt on them, making him inwardly smirk. He sees in the corner of his eyes Issei readying his gun just in case. Kiba said, "You gone far enough, Johnson," an apology to the president. As he summons his sword, making Brian smirk. Brian said, "I haven't yet, Udo, because you along with your proxy came into my house uninvited and insulted my friend who actually suffered more than you, along with Madam Hyprocritite." As he points at Kiba and Akeno, who scowls at him in anger. Kiba said, "You don't know anything about us." As he narrowed his eyes at Brian. Brian said, "Let's see, you were taken in by the church and was a part of the Holy Sword Project, but those who were deemed failures were killed. You managed to escape, but you succumbed to the poison, but Red Riding Hood saved." As he looks at the shocked expression Kiba face, making Brian smirk. Kiba asked, "How?" Brian said, "I make it my business to know." He turns towards Akeno, who gave him a brave face along. Brian said, "You carry the name of the clan that ordered your mother and possible your death, but you scorn your father who has the responsibility of a high fallen angel, so basically you are spitting on your mother grave." As he points the now crying Akeno as Brian mentioned her mother. Brian said, "The only person in your group that actually suffer was Konkyo." As he points at Konkyo, who has a shocked expression on her face. Brian said, "Get out of my apartment and never return." As he points at the door looking at the peerage calmly but inwardly is angry. Riaz get up from the ground and summons a circle that appeared in the middle of the apartment. All of the peerage members got on the circle and Riaz glares at Brian, who gives it back to her, along with giving her the finger, which made Riaz scowl in anger. Riaz said, "This isn't over." As she vanishes, leaving the duo alone for now. Brian let out a sigh and he turns to see Asia looking at him with tears in her eyes, causing Brian to sigh again. He walks over to her and he gets down on one knee to wipe the tears from Asia's eyes and he gives Asia a smile which was mirrored by her. Brian said, "Sorry, Asia." Asia said, "It okay and thank you for defending me." As she gives Brian a smile which he returns. Brian said, "Good, but to the matter at hand, we need to take down the fallen angels." Issei said, "How are we going to do that? They outnumber us. Perhaps I can lend you some assistance." The trio looks around for the voice, but they see a blue portal opening up in front of their eyes, causing Brian and Issei to stand on guard. The portal opens fully, and they see three male figures that made Brian's eyes pop out in shock as he recognized the three figure as he knew them from his world when he was still fighting crime on it. The male figure on the left has a martial artist build, and he was wearing on a red and black suit with a face mask and helmet resembling the Christian devil, with the horns on the top of the head. He has the logo of 2DS, and he is holding a billy club, and he has a smirk on his face as he looks at Moon Knight. The man in the middle has a martial artist build, was wearing a yellow mask with the pointed black and white almond eyes, the yellow sash, dressed in an open green jumpsuit with a yellow slash around the waist with yellow boots, but what caught Issei and Asia's attention was his dragon tattoo. The male on the right has short black hair and black eyes with a muscular build, dressed in a full black suit with white boots. On his chest was a black bulletproof vest, and on it was a huge white skull that covers the front, and he has on a black trench coat. He was also armed with all kinds of firearms. Brian said, "Hey guys." As he waves at his friends. Brian's apartment. Issei asked, "So you along with the other three are from another Earth where you may run around in costume to fight bad guys, am I correct?" As he pinches his nose in irritation. The four otherworldly vigilantes nodded their heads, which caused Asia to look in awe at them, but Issei looks at Brian in betrayal, making Brian look down in guilt because he wasn't honest with his best friend, but to tell him he came from another world, that saying take him to the asylum. Issei asked, "You in the martial artist costume are living weapon called Iron Fist?" As he looks at Iron Fist with a curious look. Iron Fist nodded, and he stands up to show his Iron Fist technique, making Issei and Asia look at the fist in awe, but before they could ask question, Iron Fist stopped channeling his Kai into his fist, making the two residents of the supernatural world sigh in disappointment as they wanted to see the full ability of the Iron Fist. Issei asked, "You dressed in the devil costume are blind as a bat, but your other senses have sharpened, and you are a lawyer?" As he looks at Daredevil, who nodded his head in affirming what Issei said is true. Issei asked, "And finally you are some kind of revenant who believes in killing. Will everyone know evil will make the world a better place?" As he looks at Punisher, who gives his cold, emotionless look, but he nods his head. Punisher said, "Well, I may be still alive, but James' empire died when his father died, and only the Punishers remain." As he crosses his arms and looks the other way as he saw the Brian smirk at him. Brian mocked, "So gritty and dark, are you sure you are not from the DC universe?" As he made Daredevil and Iron Fist sniggered as they see Punisher scowl, but Issei along with Asia looked confused. Issei asked, "DC Universe?" As he looks at Brian for answers. Brian said, "Never mind, but let's remember the aim." As he tries to change the subject about the aim. This caused everyone to remember that the fallen angels are still at large and they will not stop until Asia is back in their custody. Punisher brainstorms a plan which caught Brian's attention as he sees Punisher in deep thought. Brian asked, "Punisher, what your plan?" Which caused everyone to look at Punisher with a curious look. Punisher said, "I have a plan and you will not like it. Plubrum. Riaz was talking with Sona, who is also a devil and came from a major class devil family called Citri, but right now they are in a heated discussion about a certain white-caped vigilante's actions. Sona asked, he did what as she looked at her childhood friend with a horrified look as she hears what Moon Knight been doing under their radar. Riaz scowled, he even has a nun in his custody and he killed a fallen angel. As she rubs her face, still feeling the stings from the punch that been given to her by Brian. Sona said, he is getting out of control, Riaz, and we need to get him under our control. As she messes with her glasses and thinks of plans of getting not only Moon Knight but Issei under control. Sona continued to brainstorm ideas in getting Moon Knight and Issei under their control, but she remembers something. Riaz's peerage outnumbers them, causing Sona to smirk, which got the attention of Riaz as she sees the smirk on Sona's face, making her want to know what the plan. Riaz asked, "What's the plan, Sona?" Sona said, "Maybe you can revive them when they get themselves killed by the fallen angels." Riaz said, "I'm listening." As she mirrors the smirk. Sona said, "Well, if you beat them in the match then you can get them to become devils and you can have them get you out of their marriage." While the meeting was going on, Moon Knight, Daredevil, Iron Fist and Punisher were making their way towards the fallen angels base to kill the group so Asia can be at ease for a bit. Moon Knight remembers the plan. He had some very vocal comments. Flashback. What? Brian looked at Punisher, who has an emotionless gaze on his face with an expression of both dumbfoundedness and anger after he heard the plan coming from the Punisher, while the rest of the group look at the two cautiously just in case if the argument will heat. The Punisher said, "My plan is that three of us go to the fallen angel's base to kill the goons and get answers out of them." Brian said, "I heard what you said and it a bad plan, Jason." As he crosses his arms over his chest. Punisher asked, "Why it is a bad plan, Brian?" As he looks curiously at Brian. Brian said, "We will walk right into a trap and fallen angel isn't as dumb as they look." Making Asia nodded her head in agreement as she remembered being under their care. Brian said, and let not forget about the devils because they are persistent in getting me and Issei into the peerage. Causing Issei to nod in agreement, making Daredevil narrowed his eyes at them. Daredevil said, let me deal with them then. As he held up his billy club. Brian said, tempting but no Jeff because she can bring her brother who is one of the Satan and have the whole devil race after us. As he sighs in frustration and plays with his hair. Issei said, which makes her untouchable, but Brian might have broken that streak. As he also sighs. Brian said, yeah, but you know what, let's keep the plan, and Issei makes no devil harms Asia. He looks at Issei with a serious look. Issei nodded his head, and Brian nodded back as he got up from his seat with old friends to take out the fallen angels, but before walk out the door with his friends, he hugged from behind by Asia, causing Brian to turn his head to look at her. Asia said, please be careful and watch out for Father Freddy can disturbed. As Asia shuddered as she recalled several times she crossed with the psychotic priest. Brian said, we will return Asia, and beside heroes always win. As he gives Asia a wink and puts his mask. As Brian was about to leave, he gives Asia one last wave, then he heads out of the apartment, leaving Issei and Asia alone in the apartment. Issei readies his handgun just in case of Ria's or her peerage come by to force him to release Asia back in the fallen angel's custody. Asia whispered, please be safe, Brian. Flashback over, the team sees the base of the fallen angel's base up ahead, but they stop as they see 3 exorcists guarding base, making the 4 heroes narrowed their eyes at the guards. Punisher whips out an M16A1 and he aims it at the middle exorcist, locking it on the exorcist's forehead. Punisher said, target locked on. As he reaches for the trigger of the gun. Bang, the bullet went through the head of the middle exorcist's head, causing the exorcist to fall, which made the other 2 exorcists get on high alert, but before they could do anything, Punisher shot them one by one, causing them to join their comrade in death. Punisher said, entrance cleared. As he puts down his weapon and gives a nod to his allies. The team moved towards the base, and as they got to the door, Moon Knight kicked the door, which gained the attention of the people inside of the base as they see the heroes standing in the middle of the doorway, all in their combat stance. Moon Knight along with his friends checks to see what they are up against as they see several exorcists, but they see several figures that stood out, which made the group narrowed their eyes as they checked them out. One was a young man with short white hair and red eyes dressed in clerical clothing, looking at them with a disturbing smile that would have given a certain crown prince of crime a run for his money. Moon Knight knew who this was, and he knew he plays an important role. Another figure was also a male, but he was a fallen angel with the appearance of a middle-aged looking man with short black hair and dark blue eyes, dressed in a pale gray trench coat over a white dress shirt with a matching ascot, black pants and shoes, a pair of black gloves, and a black fedora. The other 2 were both females fallen angels, but the team notices several differences between the 2 female angels. One was a tall and buxom woman with brown eyes and long navy blue hair that obscured her right eye. She is dressed in a maroon trench coat-like top with a wide collar, a matching miniskirt, and black-heeled shoes. The trench coat top was open at her chest, giving a view to her breasts and cleavage. She also wore a gold necklace around her neck. She appears to wear a white shirt underneath her top, but they can only see it from the bottom. Her fellow female fallen angel was a girl with blonde hair styled into twin tails and blue eyes, dressed in a gothic Lolita attire, which comprised a black Lolita dress with white frills, a large black bow on the front, and a green jewel embedded on the collar, white thigh-high socks, and black shoes. She also wore a large black bow on top of her hair. The white-haired priest asked, who the fuck you? As he points towards the team and he reaches for his gun. Moon Knight said, we will ask the questions here, Selzen. As he reaches for some crescent darts. Freed said, hehehe, you aren't a devil, and I see neither your friends, especially the one up in the devil suit. As he points to the calm but inwardly pissed off Daredevil and he laughed loudly. Moon Knight said, you will leave Asia alone or else. As he threatened Freed, who is calming down from laughing but still hold his insane smile. Freed asked mockingly, or else what, as he looked at Moon Knight with his insane grin. Moon Knight fires his darts at Freed and they all ended hitting him in his body, making him cry out in pain, which started a fight between the team and the bad guys. Iron Fist was fighting a bunch of exorcists in hand-to-hand combat. Daredevil is fighting Middle, who has a battle maniac grin on her face as she fights Daredevil, who was fighting with his billy club. Punisher was shooting at Donasek, who was launching a light spear at Punisher, but Punisher rolled out of the way, making the spear stuck in the ground. Moon Knight is fighting Calwarner in sword fights. They are locking blades with one another, creating sparks as their blades clashed. Calwarner goes for a strike, but Moon Knight dodges and nicks her left side, causing Calwarner to let a cry in pain as the slash burned her skin. Calwarner said, you will pay for that. As she charges at Moon Knight about to go for another slash. Moon Knight jumps over her and he stabs her through the chest, causing her to gurgle up blood from the mouth, along with dropping her sword, which caught the attention of everyone in the church as they watched Calwarner turn to dust. Middle said, you will pay for that, mortal. as she summons a light spear, but Daredevil uses his billy club to stab her through the chest, causing metal turns to dust. Donaseek said arrogantly, useless. And you may have killed 2 of my comrades, but I remain. As he throws several light spears at the heroes. The heroes dodged out of the way, but the exorcists weren't so lucky as they were impaled in their chest by the light spears, making them fall dead to the ground dead. Punisher shoots Donaseek in the wings, causing him to let out a scream in agony. Iron Fist channel Kai in his hand to making his hand glow yellow, and he delivers a punch to chest of Donaseek, causing him to crash into the wall, creating a large spiderweb crack. Moon Knight walks towards the down-fallen angel who is looking up at him with a glare. Moon Knight said, "Tell me who ordered the hit on Issei now." As he points the sword at the fallen angel throat. Donaseek said, "God." As he weakly laughs. Moon Knight stabs Donaseek in the left shoulder, causing Donaseek to scream out in pain as blood comes out of his left shoulder. Moon Knight narrowed his eyes at Donaseek, who is holding his left shoulder in pain trying to ease it. Donaseek said, "I will never tell you anything." Moon Knight said, "I guess we will ask Azariel or Kakabiel and get my answer." As he narrowed his eyes at the fallen angel. Donaseek asked weakly, how do you know them, as he looks at Moon Knight in shock and fear. Moon Knight said, "I make it my business to know everyone." As he stabs Donaseek in the chest ending his life. Before the heroes could say anything they hear several footsteps coming behind them, making them all turn to see Riaz and her peerage looking at the destruction, along with the dead bodies of the base. Moon Knight said, "Sup princess." As he gave Riaz a lazy wave. Riaz looks angry at his nonchalant attitude, but she sees that he is not alone as she and Peerage look new-face, but they all look to Daredevil in disgust as he is wearing a costume that mocking their race. Moon Knight sees this and smirks under his mask, but he frowns as he remembers something or someone missing causing him to curse. Moon Knight said, "Shit, he got away." As he nods at Punisher who reaches into his coat to pull out a smoke bomb. Moon Knight said, "Well princess, I wish we could all stay and chat, but we all got better stuff to do, so peace out." As he gives the signal to Punishers to drop the smoke bomb. As the bomb hits the ground, the whole church is covered in smoke, leaving Riaz and her peerage coughing. The heroes use the distraction to leave the church and get back to the apartment. Brian's apartment. Asia is looking at the door with a worried look as she waits for Brian and his friends to come back. Issei sees Asia's worried look causing him to sigh and to walk over to her, getting her attention as she looks at him. Issei said, "I know you are worried, but don't worry, he and his friends are probably moping the floor with those fallen angels." As he tries to ease Asia's mood. Asia smiled, but they hear the sound of the door being opened, causing Issei to pull out his handguns. As he turns around, he sees to his relief it was a maskless Brian and his friends back from the mission, but he notices Brian has a scowl which made Asia along with Issei concerned. Asia said, "You're back." As she runs over to Brian and hugs him, causing him to blush under. This caused his friends to snigger at him, but they stop as they see his glare that was directed at them. Brian returns the hug and he lets Asia as he remembers that Freed got away, which didn't sit right with him, as Freed is a dangerous people to have unsupervised. Brian said, "Asia, Freed got away and we need to train." As he looks at her shocked look, but it changes to a look of determination. Asia said, "I will do it." As they were discussing the training, the one above all, who is in his glowing orb form, was watching them from his domain. One above all has been checking Moon Knight's progress, and so far he has been getting positive results that please him. The one above all said, "They're doing a fine job and soon they will be with the Avengers, but now they have their own mission." As he pulls up another image of the Avengers fighting creatures in the Fate Zero world. End of the part 1. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.